Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Parshat Miketz. So in Parshat Miketz, we begin to fully develop the role of the prophet in the Jewish people. As I said last week, I see Yosef really as the prototypical prophet. He's the one who brings the word of Hashem to the people, but beyond that, beyond bringing the visions that he sees and perhaps the interpretations he's provided by God to those who need them, he takes another step. He also is there to test the people. In the early parts of the Chumash, with Avraham and with many others, what we see is how again and again and again Hashem tests the people. And when he tests people, he doesn't just say, hey, what is the result? Is X true or is Y true? He makes X or Y true by virtue of putting people in a situation where they have to make a choice and they have to grow. So the Akedah, for example, is a classic test. Abraham's willingness and his growth and his fear of God is actually not just tested by the Akedah, but made real by the Akedah. And so you have the role of this test in order to grow people spiritually. And we see that in the early parts of the Chumash. But of course, later on in Parshat Shoftim, we see the role of the prophets, and it explicitly says that because the prophets, because the Jewish people weren't able to deal with Hashem face to face, it was too much, God was going to establish prophets. And prophets are going to serve as intermediaries in order to make things easier to digest. But of course, one of the things they have to serve as intermediaries for is the act of testing, the act of bringing out spiritual growth in the people. And Yosef is the prototype in this, in that he's there to bring spiritual growth out among his brothers. Now, early on in the Parsha, we have various and sundry things that go on with Pharaoh, but what we see in this early case, the early parts of the Parsha, is that Pharaoh is identifying a potential. He's identifying a purpose that's greater than Pharaoh's life. And this is the thing that Yosef begins to grasp and understand. It's that there's opportunity for people to do more than just be competitive, more than just fight with one another for prime position, but there's also the ability for them to do things that are greater than their lives, that extend beyond themselves and to give them purpose. And this, of course, is something that Hashem is very much in favor of. When we see zero-sum people earlier on, like we see before the days of the flood, this is a situation that has to be rectified. And in fact, Egypt has made an example of the great zero-sum Pharaoh going up against God and being destroyed as a result. And so what we see here is Pharaoh is somebody who is, not Pharaoh, Yosef is somebody who is serving against the zero-sum reality. And as somebody who's serving against the zero-sum reality, he's going to bring his family now past that role. Now, Yosef spends many years in Egypt. He doesn't want anything to do with his family. They have all sorts of problems, all sorts of issues. And as they have all sorts of problems and issues, the biggest one, of course, of those issues is that they are extremely competitive with one another. They are people who are unable to give somebody else pride of place and pride of position if it means losing it for themselves. And of course, Yosef is the first victim of this. And if you came from a family like that, you wouldn't want to have anything to do with him either. So Yosef has two sons. By the way, later on, we see these two sons are the first two brothers who don't exhibit this sort of competitiveness in the Chumash. All of the brothers we see beforehand are people who fight and kill with each other. And Lord Jonathan Sachs points out that these two brothers, Ephraim and Manasseh, are the exclusion from that. And of course, we bless our children in their names. And so Yosef is somebody who grasps this idea of a greater purpose, and he's going to bring it out in his family. And the way that he does this is when they come, he sets them up for a situation. He sets them up, first he has to bring out the greater role in his father, but he also has to bring it out in his siblings. And so by forcing his father to send Binyamin down, he forces his father to do something for the betterment of the whole family that puts at risk the part of the family he loves the most. And this is the kind of growth that Yaakov has had a very hard time accomplishing, and part of the thing that set Yosef up for such a tremendous fall earlier in his life story. The second thing that Yosef does is he forces the brothers to come, when they come back to Egypt, he forces them to stand up for Binyamin. Now, the first time they tried to stand up for Binyamin, they said, we're all going to be slaves. But of course, in a competitive world, if you all lose, that's not so much better than there's so much worse than everybody winning. What he needs to do is he needs to have them put themselves in a position where one of them can lose and the rest of them can win, where they've shown they've gotten past this zero-sum competitive game and they're willing to do something for somebody else, even if it means their own loss of place. And so who steps up to this role? It is none other than Yehuda. Yehuda, who has learned responsibility, has been taught it by the story of Tamar, is the person who says, you know what, I might have leadership in this group of people. Clearly I do. But I'm willing to give myself up and my own position of leadership up for the betterment of Binyamin. And so because of that, Yosef ends up creating a test just like a divine test, a test that brings out the best in the family, repairs the family, lifts them up, and prepares them to begin to take the steps towards being the children of Israel, the nation of Israel. So when we're looking at examples of leadership, examples of things that are necessary for a community to be strong and to grow, we can see Yosef and Yehuda as two great examples. Yehuda, of course, who takes responsibility and as a prince, as a king should. And we see Yosef as the one who sets up a situation in which the spiritual growth and the emotional and psychological, all the other kind of growth, the growth of the brothers can be accomplished and realized. Shabbat Shalom.